Hey guys, we're gonna do another lesson here like we did yesterday. I hope yesterday's social studies lesson went okay for you and you were able to complete it. We're gonna do pretty much the same thing today. We're gonna go through some of these slides and then I will post a Google quiz for you to complete. Today will be the last part of this lesson on the impact of English colonization on Australia. So tomorrow there won't be any slides, like new slides for me to go through with you, but you will have a test over this entire lesson. So from this week and then last week. I did post yesterday all the slides. You are able to use all of them on today's quiz as well as tomorrow's test. So feel free to do that. Again, if you have any questions over any of these assignments, please feel free to email me and let me know. I'm here to help and we'll get through it. So let's get started here. Yesterday we ended with the separation policy that the government had put in place where children were taken from their parents and the Aboriginal people became known as the Lost Generation. Today we're going to talk about their rights, health, literacy, and language today. So what's going on today? Yesterday was about the history, and today is about what they go through today. So there are approximately today 670,000 Aboriginal people in Australia, which is only about 3% of the population. European colonization of Australia was devastating for the Aboriginal communities, and we talked about that yesterday, that they're known as lost generation because a lot of them died due to disease and becoming slavery, and for not being able to teach their own children, being forbidden to teach their own children about their culture and their language. The Aboriginal way of life in modern Australia is drastically different than what it was like prior to European contact. So it's gotten somewhat better, but it's not great by any stretch of the imagination. As far as language goes, the 28 Aboriginal language families were nearly wiped out by European colonization. So that pretty much means when the colonists came, their language died. Out of 24.1 million Australians today, only 48,000 speak an Indigenous language. So it's a very few number of people that speak this language. And then English is still the dominant language of the country. Literacy, let me go back. Oops, sorry about that. In Australia's more remote areas, Aboriginal school attendance and overall literacy rates remain lower than other groups in Australia. So literacy rates you're talking about people that know how to read and write, okay? So this is saying that in Aboriginal schools, there's a lower literacy rate. And we have talked about how literacy rates can play into the economic well-being of a country. So it definitely affects the gross domestic product, and we've talked about that. So Aboriginal children are significantly behind their non-Indigenous classmates when they begin school. So if they are coming from an Aboriginal tribe or people, their children are significantly behind. Only a small percentage of remote Aboriginal communities have a school that goes through high school, and only about 10% of Aboriginal students graduate. So think about that. That's a really, really small percentage. So we've talked about this when we were talking about the economy. I believe it was with, what did we just study? Southwest Asia, I think. Without a good education, the students are unable to get a good job, which is then causing them to have a low standard of living. And remember, the higher the standard of living, the stronger the economy is for the country. Many Aboriginal people are stuck in a cycle of poverty. Moving on to health then. So health is also a concern for Australia's Aboriginal people. Cardiovascular diseases are the number one cause of death among Aboriginal people. Infant mortality rates are doubled for Aboriginals compared to non-Indigenous Australians. And life expectancy is actually about 10 years lower for Aboriginals than for non-Aboriginals. So that's a big thing. 10 years lower. Here's a chart of that. In the blue, you can see the Aboriginal Islander peoples is in blue. So for males, the life expectancy in years is 69.1 years, and in females, it's 73.7. And then non-Indigenous Australians, so if they're not Aboriginal descent, is 79.7% for males and 83.1% for years for life expectancy. So that's a pretty big difference. All right, this is where it gets a little hairy. So in the 1960s, Australians began to recognize the terrible mistreatment of the Aboriginal people, and policies began to change to be more in favor of Aboriginal rights. So if you think about that too, in 1960s, the civil rights movement was happening in the United States as well, right? So even though they were the original inhabitants of Australia, Aboriginal people were not counted with the country's population until they were officially added to the census in 1967. So that's a long time to not be counted as part of the population. That did not happen until 1967. And here's a picture of protesting. Aboriginal people during this time were also granted voting rights, and they could hold seats in Parliament. So that's a big deal. Racial discrimination became illegal in Australia in 1976. And if you remember from yesterday, there was a law that in the 1800s that made it legal for settlers to use force against the Aboriginals. So finally in 1976, it was illegal to discriminate against them. In 2008, the Australian Prime Minister officially apologized to the Aboriginal people on behalf of all Australians. So that's a big thing, but that didn't happen until 2008, so not that long ago. Here's a protester. Okay, so today, these changes are a start, but more should be done to improve the lives of the Aboriginal people. Poverty rates are high still among the Aboriginal people, and decades of discrimination and mistreatment have left them with poor health care, with poor education, and with unemployment. So that's still not good for them, guys. The poverty rates are still real high, and discrimination is still happening. Here's a picture of looks like a village. 1/3 of Australians, Aboriginal people, live in poverty. Think about that. 1/3 of this population lives in poverty. New generations have inherited their ancestors' deep trauma and anger from losing their land, culture, and families. Aboriginal children are 24 times more likely to spend time incarcerated than their non-Indigenous classmates. So think about that. 24 times more likely to go to prison. Many Aboriginals end up trapped in a life of poverty and crime. So here's a picture, and there's another picture. Now there's a short video I want to show you of today, at life in the Aboriginal, in an Aboriginal tribe. This video was taken from 2011, so it's not super current, but it's the closest thing I could find, so you'll have to deal with it.
It's a scene which shames a modern, wealthy country. The Australian government has promised to do something about it, but these are the squalid conditions in which many Aboriginal people continue to live.
It's not good enough, people. There's three old people we got there. They're pensioners, a couple of them on dialysis, and they're living rough. They shouldn't be in there at all. This is too rough.
It makes the job of health workers all the more difficult.
It's like a shantytown, some of the places I've been to. I mean, it's really shocking. The lack of money that they've got for proper nutrition, and the lack of education, and the lack of, it's just enormous.
This is a town camp in Alice Springs, where houses are overcrowded with extended families and are due to be refurbished. Last year, the people of this camp were promised that 3 new homes would be built here for them. Today, officials came along to break the news that there was no longer any money available and they'd have to go without. The authorities say repair work on existing homes will start soon. New houses have sprung up elsewhere in Alice Springs. These are the sort of improvements which will be praised by the Prime Minister Julia Gillard when she visits the town tomorrow. But 200 miles to the north is the remote community of Ambladowach,
I'm living here.
where more families are sleeping rough, even though the nighttime temperature drops to below zero at this time of year. They told me they'd been evicted from their homes while they were being renovated. The authorities say they chose to sleep in the open.
Chipped away from my house here.
You're sleeping here now?
Yeah.
And some are still waiting for the houses to be fixed.
So you don't know how long you will be living out
We
like
don't
this?
know how long we'll be staying out here in the cold.
This is supposed to offer protection from the summer sun, not the winter cold, but this is where 3 children had been sleeping. Some families have been given proper tents to stay in, but it's hard to believe other Australians would put up with being treated like this. Outside contractors do the renovations, while most of the local men are unemployed, living off welfare handouts, as they have done for decades.
So I want to stop that there because think about that. They have outside contractors going in, being paid to be building homes and different things for this village, and yet the village men who are able to work, they're not given the jobs. I don't know about you, but that kind of irritates me a lot.
Shopping is paid for using government-issued cards to ensure they spend taxpayers' money on food rather than alcohol.
It's as if the government is sitting at your own kitchen table and being intimate part of your life.
The government's tight grip on Aboriginal affairs in the Northern Territory has drawn criticism from the United Nations.
I was really surprised at their anger, their frustration, their anguish over the intervention policies of the government. In many ways, they felt huge insults to their dignity and their right to self-determination.
But there are Indigenous leaders who say their dependency culture must end.
They've always had other people doing things for them. It's always somebody else doing things instead of us doing things for ourselves, for our children. And I think that's the reason why that's the expectation.
The government, which formally apologised for past wrongs against Aborigines, has also pledged a better future. The policy is called Closing the Gap. But there is such a long way to go, it's expected to take decades for the first Australians to achieve true equality. Ian Woods, Sky News, in Australia's northern...
Okay, so I hope you guys watched that and were as your eyes were opened a little bit more as mine were, because I that kind of kills me to see people treated like that, as I'm hoping it does for you too. But that concludes our lesson for today. Again, go to Google Classroom, complete the 5-question quiz. Tomorrow you will just have the test over this chapter. Any questions, please feel free to email me. I'm here to help. Hope everyone's doing well and behaving. I hope you're getting outside for a little bit and not just sitting in front of your screens. But yeah, hope you guys are doing well. Hope to talk to you all soon. Bye.